Good morning, or depending when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always told, I had a voice radio. So today, we are going to look at an exciting new supporter card that has been revealed from the upcoming Sun and Moon 4 Crimson Invasion expansion. It's Lusamine, and I've had a look round. I've done some Googling. That is a pronunciation that most people are going with. Maybe it's wrong. Maybe you disagree. If so, I have two things to say. Firstly, I apologise. Secondly, it's the best I can do. Speaking of do, what does Lusamine actually do? Well, it allows you to put two in combination of stadium and supporter cards from your discard pile into your hand. It's a way to either recover stadium cards or to recover supporter cards. Now, of course, the wording on this is very important. As I always say, we will have to wait for the official English language card, but the way it is at the moment, and I've asked people and they've checked this for me, including the lovely David Hockman, and the lovely @DifferentFight on Twitter, the person who originally sent me the card or forwarded it on from the Japanese Twitter. But essentially what we have at the moment says that you can either grab two stadiums, or two supporters, or one stadium, one supporter. And it's really important that we have that flexibility here, because if it just got stadiums back, that wouldn't be as good. If it just got supporters back, that wouldn't be as good. Of course, the first question, the first thing on everybody's mind, the first thing we need to address: is this the new Versus Seeker? Now, short answer, no, because this isn't an item. So like sometimes when you really have nothing in your hand, you play a Skylar to search for a Professor Sycamore next turn, and it's not perfect. You would rather be playing Sycamore now, but you've got it for next turn, and that's all right. Same thing here. You play Lusamine, and you've got that Guzma ready to win the game next turn. Now, if you use Lusamine to get two more Guzma into your hand, then yes, maybe your opponent does play an N, and then those Guzma go back into your deck, but that's not actually the end of the world. If you need a Guzma to win the game, and you play a Lusamine to get two Guzma back into your hand, and then your opponent drops an N, they're still in your deck. You can still draw into them. If you're playing cards like Octillery, you can still get them from an N to 1. The key thing is, they're in your deck, not your discard pile. They are usable. And certainly, in the mid to late game, this is great. I don't think this would ever be more than a one-off supporter. But a great parallel here is Gardevoir GX's GX attack. Getting 10 cards from your discard pile back into your deck. You never want to use this. The ideal situation with Gardevoir is you've got all the cards you need in your deck, so that you can just sit there attacking every turn. But some turns, it is worth giving up your attack for the turn to recover those cards that you need to win the game, to get that energy back, to get those supporters back. This supporter does the same thing. You don't want to use your supporter for the turn to give you a supporter next turn, or indeed to just have them available for the late game. But the fact of the matter is, if you look and see, I'm against Metagross, they're going to keep retreating every turn. Even when they run out of Max Potion, Metagross can just keep retreating and throwing up new Metagross until you've half KO'd all of their Metagross. Then you can start KOing, and that's after they run out of Max Potion. Against a deck like Metagross, you're going to need those Guzma. So some turns, it's going to be worth, rather than digging for extra energy and more evolutions, it's going to be worth just going, you know what? I'm going to use Lusamine. I'm going to have the Guzma in my deck so that I can win the game. Because let's face it, ladies and gentlemen, we've all had those turns where we've had to use Professor Sycamore on the first turn of the game. And we've gotten rid of 2 or 3 Lysander. Well, in the new format, with Versus Seeker going away, it's a lot worse. No longer can you just get rid of Guzma and Versus Seeker it later. When you get rid of them, when you discard them, they are gone for the rest of the game, unless you use something like Gardevoir's GX attack. And certainly in a Gardevoir deck, you'd probably never play this card. Because why would you? It's your supporter for the turn. You can use a different supporter while using your GX attack. But in some decks, you're going to Lysander away stuff like Guzma in the early game, or stuff like Acerola that you need for that healing. And Lusamine is going to really help. Take Golisopod decks. Using Acerola to heal while switching, pick up the damaged Golisopod in the active, put one of your benched ones in the active, and then do 120. Acerola is so good in Golisopod. This is going to be really handy for being able to give yourself extra Acerola to use in the mid to late game. Now, of course, one of the problems with Golisopod is that when you're using cards like Guzma and Acerola, you're not drawing cards. It can clunk up occasionally. Whereas cards like Gardevoir tend to play things like Octillery, so you can draw more cards in the mid to late game. Or they tend to play things like Oranguru, so they can draw more cards in the mid to late game. And if you're playing a deck that plays Octillery, this supporter becomes so much better. Because when you're playing Octillery, especially if you're playing, say, a 2-2 line of Octillery, then you can afford to use that as your draw power for the turn, which will open up extra options in terms of being able to use your supporter for the turn as a utility, like an Acerola, like a Guzma, like a Lusamine. Make no mistake about it. This is very, very handy in terms of allowing you to just get those supporters back. And with Versus Seeker going, we don't have ways to get supporters back. No real good ways like that. And this comes in and fixes that gap. There are going to be a lot of players in this new format without Versus Seeker who are way too free and easy in discarding supporters, and it's going to come back to bite them. This might take your supporter slot for the turn, but it opens up avenues late in the game that you might not have without it, and for that I really like it. But then, of course, let's not forget that it also allows you to grab your stadiums back, which for some decks is going to be absolutely vital and for others isn't. A deck like Metagross, not heavily reliant on stadiums. A deck like Vikavolt Bulu rarely plays stadiums. But to use an example that's rotating out, because it's one of the best, Rayquaza really relies on Skyfield in order to allow you to bench a whole number of Pokemon and then be able to do a huge amount of damage. And one of the issues with a deck like Rayquaza nowadays, not only can your opponent get rid of your stadium by playing a replacement, but they can also get rid of your stadium by playing a field blower. 4 stadiums might not be enough, and these go to your hand. So you can immediately, unlike when you get a supporter with Lusamine, you can immediately grab that stadium, put it straight down. And the reason why Rayquaza is such a good example of this is that in Rayquaza decks you tend to be relying on Pokemon like Shaymin and Dragonite. Shaymin allows you to draw cards, Dragonite allows you to get Shaymin, which allows you to draw cards. So you don't need to use draw supporters like Sycamore as often, meaning you can afford to use Lusamine to grab your Skyfield while you use your Shaymin, etc. to draw cards. That is the key, ladies and gentlemen, here. You've got to have a turn where you can afford to play this. Turn 1, everyone wants to play Bridget. When you're 1 prize away from winning, everyone wants to play Guzma. When you're playing Golisopod, you really want to be playing Acerola. But if you can find a deck that has real use for stadiums, or wants to recover those supporters, and can find a turn to do so, this is going to be great. And do remember that you can use Tapu Lele to search it out. So nowadays, playing one-off supporters is way easier than it used to be, because you can just roll with Tapu Lele. one of the things about the Pokemon trading card game is that you've got drawing supporters like Sycamore and N, and then utility supporters like Acerola, Guzma, Team Flag, Runt, etc. And if you play too many utility supporters throughout a game, you don't draw enough cards. If you're playing something like Octillery, that's less of a problem. But in other decks, it's much more of a problem. So really, with Lusamine, you've got to ask yourself the question, do I want to play this over something like a Guzma or an Acerola? Am I going to have those turns where I can afford to play this? If this was an item card, it would be amazing. But it's your only supporter for the turn. That is the biggest issue with Lusamine. But make no mistake about this. Getting supporters back in a format where we've lost Versus Seeker, great. Being able to recover stadiums, which for some decks is really good, yes. But for some decks, this just isn't going to fit. Playing this in an expanded Rayquaza deck, love it. Playing this in any deck that plays a 2-2 Octillery line, love it. Playing this in a deck that doesn't have draw Pokemon, that's already relying on a whole bunch of utility supporters, not a fan. Playing it in stuff like Decidueye or Gardevoir, where you've already got options to get back supporters, not that much of a fan. I think a fair Wassy score for Lusamine is 3 Wassies. It's good. You need a copy in your binder. There are some decks in which you'll play it, but not every deck and not every game. 3 Wassies. But if you disagree, ladies and gentlemen, that's what the comment section is there for. Go nuts, be nice. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at the Wassy, and Twitch at twitch.tv/PTCGRadio. If you want some live action, if you want to support the pod, you can do so at patreon.com/PTCGRadio. There's bonus pods, and bonus pod 2 is being deleted soon. If you want that, you're going to have to get on it. But by far the most important thing, as always, look after yourselves until next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.